There you go. 3, 2.
Hello and welcome to Restoring Our American Republic. I'm Chuck Benoit with The Nature of Things, where we are realigning God, government, and natural law so that we might restore our American Republic. Previously, I've been speaking about our government trying to take over the responsibilities of the church, attempting to reunite God and government. Today, I'm going to begin to present a very simple message from the Bible. That message has absolutely nothing to do with how we are to be governed. Our founding fathers were totally accepting of the preaching of the gospel and accepting as well that not everyone would proclaim Jesus Christ as their Savior, but still had to be governed in this life with the principles God has given us for this life. The backbone of the message of the Bible begins with the fall of Adam. Direct and to the point, God told Adam one thing, and the serpent told him something else. Now, the issue begins with, who did Adam believe? We aren't given timelines on how long Adam lived in the garden before this occurrence, but we are told that when given information that contradicted God, he believed that information and in essence called God a liar. Now, I'm cutting to the bone here. There are a lot of paths we can take from here. But what I intend to do is create a linear path from what the Bible calls the fall of man to his redemption, and that path must follow belief. See, there were several persons mentioned along the historical timeline of the Bible. I'm going to choose just a few of the biggies to get from the end to the beginning, to the beginning to the end very, very quickly, 5 minutes. So my first biggie would be Noah. God told him that there was going to be a flood and he needed to build an ark. And that ark was to preserve mankind and the animal kingdom. He believed God and things went well for him. Then you have Abram. God told Abram to leave his homeland and receive from God a land of his own. He believed God and it went well with him. God changed his name to Abraham and promised him a son. Now that promise took a very long time to be fulfilled. And in the meantime, Abraham took upon his own hands to, get things done. And he had a son by his wife's servant. There's no need to go into the customs of the day. Well, we have what is a misunderstanding by Abraham about the son he was promised. And this misunderstanding has been a nemesis of the Israelites even to this present day. What God had promised Abraham was to have a son that could only come from a direct intervention of God into his life. And after both he and his wife Sarah were well beyond childbearing years, they did have this son. Now here is another big deal. See, God now tells Abraham to sacrifice his God-given son. And the Bible tells us that Abraham believed that God would even raise his son from the dead because he wouldn't believe that God would fail to give him what he had promised. He both redeemed his original misconception and gave us a type of our own redemption, the death, burial, and resurrection of our Redeemer. Well, then we have Moses, who believed God and eventually led the Israelites out of Egypt. The new people of God, now about to be called Israelites, were given a heavy load of rules, and laws that were designed to do a number of things that are not needed in this narrow pathway that I'm trying to direct. This pathway from the fall to the redemption. But those who refused to follow those rules and laws were cut off from the community. They were shown to be in unbelief that God himself gave them those laws. So then we have King David. He was anointed king of Israel while Saul, the first king, was still alive. David was confident that this was God giving him the kingdom, so confident that he wouldn't take it from Saul. He waited until Saul had died. And then there's Daniel of the Lion's Den fame there. He had many instances of amazing happenings based on belief. When he approached Cyrus to tell him about a prophecy naming him, Cyrus, that was penned before even he was born, Daniel, in essence, began the return of Israel to the promised land. So I could go on, and I have certainly left so many people out on this very, very short narrative. But when you step into the New Testament, the concept of good news comes into focus. And there are 4 Gospels noted in the New Testament text. Now, I'm not speaking of the first 4 books of the Bible. They're certainly Gospels. But these Gospels articulated in the text of the Bible will be the focus of a future monologue, because we're told what to believe and in most cases how to respond based on what we believe. The Christian community is not demanding that anyone believe any of this that's coming from the Bible, but we are demanding that we be governed fairly, and natural law is the only system of morality that allows all to be governed fairly and prevents special interest groups from selfishly destroying our inalienable rights in order to attain their own special rights. So at this point, I'd love to bring into my very, very good friend, Mike Levine from Glass House Media. And Mike, how was your Memorial Day weekend? Okay, Mike, I'm not hearing anything.
I always forget to unmute. Sorry, Chuck.
That's okay. Always nice to see you,
very
Mike, and
interesting.
hear you.
And here, exactly, yeah. So, it's interesting, with the new Trump administration, and in his second term, the first Memorial Day of his second term, and over the weekend, he gave the commencement address at West Point, which was interesting. And then he also addressed, I would say primarily, or most importantly, the Gold Star families at the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier. And, his favorite general, Daniel Cain, also known as Raisin Cain, the guy that crushed ISIS in 3 weeks when everyone else was saying it would take 5 years or more, or it was even impossible to do. So Donald Trump made Daniel Cain the chief of staff. I lost that word again, Chuck. Chief,
Yeah,
the head of the
you told me
military,
that.
right? Yeah, exactly. The head of the Joint Chiefs of Staff,
There you go.
Daniel Cain. So I don't know how many people saw it, but Daniel Cain opened for the President of the United States, Vice President J.D. Vance, and Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth. And Daniel Cain, Raisin Cain, did a great job on his opening speech. Very military, very direct to the point, very matter of fact about the commitment that our military makes when they join the military. And of course, now we're talking about West Point grads who are immediately commissioned as second lieutenants when they graduate. And a second lieutenant is the lowest ranking officer in the military. So they have the responsibility of leading brigade troops, about maybe anywhere, probably about 60. So that's basically when you graduate from West Point, then you become a second lieutenant, and those are basically your responsibilities. And of course, there are so many directions you can go in the military, but it was really interesting to see President Trump literally interacting with 1,002 West Point cadets on graduation day. And he pointed out that a third of those 1,000 cadets come from families who also served in the military before. So I think that's really a significant thing for all of us to know, is that there's really a relatively small number of families who are protecting this country. And then as we drill down into that a little bit, we also know that under the previous administration, recruiting into the military was very difficult. And the number of, and actually military service members were opting to retire, opt out, not re-up, stuff like that. But under the new administration, recruiting is on fire. And basically, Trump said in his military address to West Point that we're booked. All of the billets in the military are filled. Now, I would love to, I guess if the president said it, it's probably true. So I think that's pretty interesting. And then again, I think if you want to watch a really good Memorial Day speech, watch Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth's speech. I thought Hegseth, and Daniel Kaine too, but Daniel Kaine was really there to introduce the other speakers, and he did a phenomenal job. But I feel like Pete Hegseth's speech was probably the best of the four, I would say, Chuck. And I'll just toss it over to you and see if you have any comments on what I just said.
Well, Mike, unfortunately, I didn't hear any of those speeches, but it is very interesting that we're doing so well with recruiting. You might think that a president would have a great deal of influence on recruiting because the president does give us a feeling of enthusiasm about our country or not. And the previous president has basically continued to say how terrible our nation was. And of course, the left has been saying that for a long time. We're just a terrible, terrible group of people. Unfortunately, they can point to a lot of things that Republican presidents have done that we would, if we really understood at the time, wouldn't have been happy about. But President Trump is clearly his own man. He is far more Republican-minded than any of our previous presidents, other than possibly Ronald Reagan. And it shows. We the people understand what it means to be living in a republic. We may not totally understand it, but we certainly know when we're not, and we have not been governed with a Republican form of government for a very, very long time. I probably shouldn't say this too much, but I was with a legislator over the past weekend, not this weekend, the weekend before, who informed me that the definition of the word republic is different in the Republican Party than it is anywhere else in his word, the universe. So the Republican Party has decided that they have defined the word republic or Republican different than all the rest of us could possibly understand, because we're in touch with the universe and we know what the word republic has meant for maybe 2,000, 3,000 years. Anyway, I thought that was very, very interesting.
Chuck, you're going to get me off track here because I'm so passionate about what you just said. But I will tell you something. It is repulsive to hear the leaders of our state completely misinterpreting or intentionally manipulating, just like the left does, the meaning of a word. And they do it intentionally. This is just another example. Of course, I really have to resist going down into that rabbit hole, Chuck. But nothing is worse. And, you and I talked about this Senate Bill 180 that we may get around to having a little chit-chat about. But at the end of the day, the government at the state level is becoming extraordinarily autocratic, legislating basic things that local management should be given the freedom and latitude to do on their own in the way that is best for their cities and counties, but the state of Florida is jamming this down their throats, telling them every step to take, every move to make, and codifying into law, making it illegal if they don't do it, and then lopping on the bureaucratic administrative expenses. So, as it goes back to your conversation with the unnamed legislator, I find that repulsive, and I would love to debate that legislator publicly on television about that and whatever else that legislator would like to talk about.
Yeah,
These guys cannot defend their position publicly because we, the people, will not accept the fundamental premises under which they're running our government. Chuck?
yes, they find themselves at the point where they have to shout you down, they have to cut you off, and they have to use belligerent tactics in order to put you in line because they can't articulate any kind of an honest rebuttal of what you're saying. You know, oh, we define the word differently than everybody else in the entire universe. Excuse me, that doesn't work. So yeah, I didn't mean to get you too far off the Memorial Day thing. You did have some interesting things to say about that, if you or if I possibly.
I would like to make a couple of other comments really quickly because I think
sure.
really incredibly important, right? I mean, I would say because Donald Trump is saying this to our troops at both graduation commencements and also on Memorial Day in front of Gold Star families who have paid the ultimate price, the heaviest toll to defend this country. And I would say over previous administrations, our military has been asked to do things that are indefensible, very similar to what we just talked about with our state government and their malfeasance. So Donald Trump says to the West Point cadets graduating that he will never put us into an endless war. He is in the business of ending wars. And most importantly, he's interested in preventing wars through peace, through strength. And I mean, whether you like the way Donald Trump delivers that message or not, I believe that he's totally on point with what his objectives are. And I will tell you something. He was like a grandfather on stage trying to engage with as many of those cadets as he could, bringing the cadets up on stage, obviously in very Trumpian style, commenting on how beautiful they are, how handsome they are, how physically fit they are, how they are the tip of the spear. They're the most lethal warriors on the planet, and just went on and on and on, which had to be very uplifting for those 1,002 cadets. So I wanted to bring that to your attention. And the next thing that he said that I think was super important to this particular audience is that he understands the value of their life, and he will not send them into harm's way unnecessarily and for an undefined purpose that includes a ending. So if I was a West Point cadet or a Gold Star family, I would be very happy with the message that President Donald Trump, Vice President Vance, Secretary of State Pete Hegseth, and Joint Chief of Staff Chairman Daniel Kaine delivered at the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier, Chuck, and I'll just toss it back over to you.
Yeah, again, it's just so refreshing to have a president who loves our nation and loves the people, these young men and women who serve our nation. Very, very exciting. I will like to move us into our next topic, and that is the Republican Liberty Caucus has put out an action alert to contact Governor Ron DeSantis today to speak against the SB 180. We have about, I don't know, about 8 or 10 minutes left here. We have a we have a supermajority in the House and the Senate. The idea of governor vetoing it probably just basically takes the timeline and sets it back, half a day or so, because it probably would be overruled. But what are your thoughts on the governor vetoing this anyway?
Chuck, every time we start looking at particularly substantial legislation in the Florida House, the first thing I notice is how long these bills are. So this SB 180 is a moderate bill, 48 pages long, 48 pages long. And interestingly, something the Florida Republican Assembly left out, and of course, I'm a real estate broker and a property manager, so I find it relevant. Chapter 83 is the statute that governs over landlord-tenant laws in Florida. And this bill comes out, and the first thing it does is it intervenes in the relationship between landlords and tenants. And I'm just going to preface these comments by saying that this whole bill is about disaster relief and what should happen when we have storms and this and that. And it goes into a ton of detail. And of course, something that I really would encourage everyone to realize, and I hope that everybody will, if you haven't already discovered how to look up bills on the Florida Senate and the Florida House websites, you'll find that this legislation is accessible. And then basically when a bill gets submitted to bill drafting, then the administrative staff at the Capitol, they basically take a look at the proposed legislation and they identify all of the aspects in statutory code that are impacted by the proposed legislation. And then they go back and summarize what the impact of this legislation is. And that's at the beginning. So they don't actually say what the outcome, if it was passed, but then when you read through the summary, you get into the specific law. And then once the law comes out of committee and it becomes fully engrossed, is what the term is, fully engrossed into law, which means that the bill is inserted into statute, so you can read what the ultimate, if this bill is signed into law, this is what each of the impacted statutes will read like upon passage. So the point I'm making here is when you go into the Florida House and Florida Senate website and you look at these bills, when the term fully engrossed is applied, that means that the legislation has been fully integrated into current statute. Okay, so when you're thumbing through it, there's two things you're looking for. Primarily, in order to get a handle on what the legislation actually does, you're going to look at underlined text, which is added to the law, and strike-throughs, which are removed from the law. And that kind of helps to expedite the analysis of the bill. And then if you read things that are underlined or stricken through, then you might have to go back and read some of the language that surrounds those insertions and deletions to kind of get the feeling for what the legislation actually means and the impact of the legislation on, and I'd love to say, the citizens of the state of Florida, but I also must include in this context municipalities and counties, because the state of Florida loves to tell municipalities and counties how to run their business. And I just want to make this point, Chuck. This is my overall point on not just SB 180, but so many of the other bills coming out of the Florida legislature, is this state government loves to dictate and mandate to these cities and counties how they run their business. And I think that that is horrible. I think that is a lack of leadership. And I'd like to make that point. because the state government, in my opinion, Chuck, if the state government has a problem with the way counties and municipalities are running their business, then the governor should send a delegate from his office into those counties and into those cities, and they should sit around the table as long as it takes in order to come up with a mutually agreeable understanding of what we're trying to accomplish, so we can avoid legislation that mandates that counties and cities do or do not do certain things. These counties, these cities, and the state of Florida should be able to amicably resolve their differences without the heavy hand of legislation on the cities and the counties. Chuck Benoit.
Yeah, I agree. We go back. I'm kind of like the guy at the bottom trying to just talk about the definition of words, and how can we how can we communicate if we're not even talking the same language?
Muy importante, señor.
And I just go back to the idea of there's only two forms of government. You have top down or bottom up. And
thank you, Chuck. Thank you very much.
And bottom-up government is a Republican form of government, where the people tell...
And that ain't what's happening in the great state of Florida.
The people are supposed to tell the government how they're to govern us. We're the ones that are telling them what they can do. And you're right. The only other option is an autocrat or an oligarchy. And the Democrats have been governing as an oligarchy for most of my life, if not longer. And when the Republicans do the same thing, they are not a different party. Just because the Republicans do it doesn't mean it's better than what the Democrats do. Tell you what.
How much time do we have, Chuck?
We have just a few minutes here.
Okay, great. If you don't mind, okay,
I'm going to, you can run us right off the clock. I just put in the comments, I put Governor DeSantis's phone number and email for anyone who's interested in calling him, along with the Republican Liberty Caucus, and their request to ask the governor to veto this bill. A couple of things that it does: it freezes stronger building codes. So if we have issues, the builders don't have to do a better job replacing things. It undermines Florida flood protection. It raises flood insurance premiums, destroys wetlands and rural protection, and lets developers sue your community if the developer doesn't like what your community is concerned about in regard to land use.
Not only the developer, Chuck, but the individual property owner as well.
Yeah. So those are the things that the Republican Liberty Caucus is concerned about. You can, I think their website, Republican Liberty Caucus, is... No.
You're talking Florida Republican Assembly, Chuck.
No, this is the Liberty Caucus that we're discussing right now.
Okay, great. Well, the Assembly put out a statement on it, too.
I'm sure they did. But I think the Florida Liberty Caucus website is rlc.org or something like that. So we've got...
rlcfl.org, Chuck. rlcfl.org.
And there you go. You can get more information there. And you can take us out here. Got another minute.
Okay, great. So listen, everybody should watch on X particularly. I'm sure the governor is starting to catch on to this podcasting live streaming thing. So a few days ago, he invited his favorite senator, Blaise Ngolia, into his office, and they did a live stream, just the two of them chatting back and forth like you and I are doing right now about the issues of the day, which I thought was probably one of the best public relations moves that Ron DeSantis has done in his governorship, because it really gives you a very candid look at who he is. And of course, Blaise Ngolia is let's see what I want to say. He's certainly proficient. I was going to say brilliant, and that could be true, but he's a very proficient communicator, orator, and it's a very interesting conversation that Governor DeSantis and Blaise Ngolia conducted in a live stream that they did, and they published it on X. And I watched it. It was really good, and I compliment both the governor and Senator Blazengolia, on their performance that day in a very genuine, very spontaneous, and very revealing insight into who both the governor and the senator Ngolia, who has political ambition, by the way. But there's one thing that I really noticed about that, and they were talking about the repeal of property taxes on homesteaded properties, right? And I'm a real estate broker. I've been a broker for 30 years, and I understand fully that reducing property taxes on homesteaded property is great for getting votes. Property owners vote, and everybody likes lowering taxes, but repealing property tax on homesteaded property is monumental legislation, and it would actually be a constitutional amendment if the governor gets what he wants, which I fully support. But it is so interesting that when the governor was talking to Senator Ngolia, he was explaining how this would be done and the impact of it all, Chuck. And he said, oh, of course, we would tax them, the constituent, the homeowner, the property owner, at the time of sale. And we don't have any problem at all levying transfer taxes and taxes on mortgages and intangible taxes on the transfer of property that are associated with mortgages and stuff like that. But the point I'm making to you is that this is so important when you watch these live streams, because when the governor says, we have absolutely no problem taxing them, what most people miss in that exchange is the separation between the governor in his mind from the citizens of the state of Florida. It's us and them. And while I totally agree with the governor that it is, in fact, us and them, it also positions the governor on the other side of the equation. And that was as enjoyable as it was to watch the entire video, and how I agree with the vast majority of the content that was shared between Governor DeSantis and Senator Ngolia. The most revealing thing is not what was said, but what was not said. And what was not said is that the state of Florida is an autocratic institution that imposes its will on the citizens of this state. And we should be grateful for whatever little carrot they give us, because they also have a big stick, which is taxation, Chuck.
We're going to kind of end things at that point, Mike. We're a little bit over time, but I just want to thank those of you who've been very, very consistent in giving us a thumbs up or a like or a share. These are humble beginnings, but as we continue to move forward, we feel that we have a lot of information that, especially Lake County, Florida, but including the entire state of Florida, we need to be impacting on our government. They don't seem to be listening quite as well as we would like. So this is Chuck Benoit and Mike Levine signing off. We'll see you Thursday at 11.